Thanks everyone for joining us, and thanks to our panelists, of course, who we'll introduce shortly. This webinar is hosted by the New Jersey Composting Council, and we are here to talk about food waste collection, contamination, and composting. So a little background on the NJCC. We're a nonprofit affiliate of the U.S. Composting Council, and we're dedicated to the development, expansion, and promotion of composting of organics and food waste recycling to benefit our member society and the environment. I would just invite you to join us. We're doing a whole host of activities, including webinars, and we had a summit in October, which we're hoping to announce that we'll be having the summit again this year in October as well, very soon. We try to host educational opportunities from coming to your community and doing doing workshops to compost operators training course. And so there's a whole host of benefits in addition to our advocacy and legislative work. I'll be talking about a bill that we helped work on and we did a webinar on shortly, but there's a whole host. And so we welcome you to get in touch with myself at isaac@njcomposting.com or visit our website. First, I'm going to introduce and give the floor to Matt Wasserman. Matt is an innovation and sustainability executive with 25 years of consumer products, nonprofit, and B2B experience. In particular, he co-founded Sustainable Princeton, a nonprofit that convenes residents, businesses, and the municipality and other key stakeholders to develop sustainability-focused action plans for a better future. And more recently, he started Community Food Cycle. So with that, I will let Matt take it away from here.
All right, thank you, Isaac. Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed. Are you able to share your screen?
It says host disabled attendee screen sharing.
All right, so stop that. Let me make sure. There we go. Now we are good to go.
All right, so let me share my screen again. I'd like to say, let's see. All right, so hang on, sorry, there's a need to be able to give Zoom some
permission issues on your computer there?
Yeah, sorry, didn't know that that was going to be the case. Can you guys see it now or no?
Not quite yet, nope. There we go. Matthew.
There we go. All right, excellent. Okay. All right, hello everybody. And thank you for joining, and thank you to the NJCC, Isaac and Iro for inviting me to help you to present today. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a story. It's going to kind of follow the arc of a good Disney story. You know, it's going to start off really well, and then things are going to go bad, and then, you know, hopefully things will go well again. You know, so thank you for the next 10, 15 minutes or so. So Isaac gave you my bio, but let me just give you really quickly my roles as it relates to the story you're about to hear. So in terms of Sustainable Princeton, we are a nonprofit here in Princeton, New Jersey. It's all about the environment, educating residents, working with the town, just trying to kind of move things along in a more sustainable manner. And so that's that piece. You'll hear about a project called Bloomberg Philanthropies, where I was a project manager for the town of Princeton, where we were trying to actually fix the program. You'll hear more about that. And then finally, as an entrepreneur with Community Food Cycle, and kind of how we're trying to take this to the next step. So kind of from an overall perspective, kind of program details, Princeton had a curbside organics pickup program that meant you could roll out a 32 gallon container to your curb, just like you would your garbage or your recycling. Someone would come by about once, or a Solterra or Central Jersey Waste would come by once a week and pick it up. We started about 9 years ago. We picked up food and yard waste. We allowed compostable bags. It was completely voluntary. We had about 1,000 people, 1,000 households sign up over the course of those 9 years, at probably 800 or 900 at any one time. And I think when we were finally finished, there was about 750 or 800 people who were still using it. We were using Central Jersey Waste, which eventually became Solterra. We were on 3-year contracts with them, and they were charging us not by the pound, but by the household. So they were charging us $120 a year per household to pick up the food waste, and the town split it with the residents. So the residents would basically pay about $5 a month, as would the town, in order to make this work. And then it was picked up and then taken to various farms and even an anaerobic digester at one point, in various places. They were generally in Pennsylvania and Delaware, I think once in New Jersey, but it was not local. It was always being hauled somewhere else to get rid of it. So, a little bit more about the logistics. It was started by a recycling coordinator. So if you're a town on the line right now, most of the times your recycling coordinator sits in your Department of Public Works. This was something that our recycling coordinator just wanted to take on. She had kind of read about it. I believe there might have even been some incentives about 9 years ago. And she talked to some folks at Sustainable Princeton, again, the nonprofit, to see, could we help her get the word out if we decide to, do something like this. And so we did a little bit of polling. We talked to people. Of course, there's people who say, hey, look, I already compost. I do it in my backyard, so I don't need to do this. Some people said, hey, that'd be great. Love to try it. But, overall, it was something that definitely seemed to have a positive kind of look. It had a number of benefits. Obviously, it was environmentally friendly. We were just starting to kind of generate, carbon footprints of, what waste does in landfills. So this is there. If you're part of Sustainable Jersey, at the time, we were definitely getting points for being as a town to do something like this. So they were helping us get to the next certification level within the Sustainable Jersey program. And then the thought was, at some point we might be able to save money. We knew we couldn't do it originally, but we knew there'd be landfill fees that would be offset. But it'd be a learning curve, but potentially there could be a time when we could save some money. So, as we dive into kind of who participated and what we saw, it really obviously skewed toward environmentally conscious in terms of who signed up. We had a lot of people who wanted to, who'd always wanted to try composting but never did, and so they thought this was a great thing for us to do. We had compost expanders. So, hey, I compost all my flowers and my vegetables, but I would never put in any type of protein or fat. So it allowed folks like that people like that to use the program. And then people who've tried and failed composting for one reason or another. It's like, hey, it's just too difficult. I got to be on it too much. I'd love to do it, but I just haven't. So yeah, let's do the program. So there were quite a few different people we were pulling from, and that's how we got to basically about 1,000 people. Again, it was never mandatory. We talked about making it mandatory, and I'll get into why that is in a little bit, but it never was. Sometimes we have found that some people actually shared a bin for one reason or another, whether, for some folks, even $60 a year is just more than they want to spend. So if they could cut it down to 30, that was great. Some people just believe, hey, I pay my taxes, my taxes are already high enough. I don't really want to pay anymore. So if they could reduce it there, they would. We use a lot of e-blasts. We did town newspaper articles, the tax bill that gets mailed to everyone on an annual basis. We would put a flyer in there that talked about this to get people to sign up. And then a lot of the folks from Sustainable Princeton and other sustainably minded folks would write op-eds in the paper as well. So had a lot of different ways to, from a participation perspective, to get this moving. From an observation perspective, overall, it worked pretty well for about 7 years. I say, or so we thought, because you'll see why in a second here. We picked up about 25 tons of food waste per month from those 1,000 people. Now, for perspective, I think we pick up about 600 tons of food, is that right? 600 tons of garbage a month in the town. I have to go back and check that, but so it was small, but again, it was only 1/7 of the town that was using it. We did find that the 32-gallon toters are for the most part too large for most families. No one has 32 gallons of food waste on a weekly basis. On occasion, they would be filled in the kind of early spring or fall. People were using it for some of their yard waste, but for the most part, way too big. And you did need to educate and handhold at times. People would call, oh, it smells, or it this, or I don't know how to do this, or can I put this in? And we had answers for everything, and sometimes we had to hold their hand. And sometimes we'd even show up at their house to kind of show them how to do something. But it was all kind of required to get folks to want to use the program. All right, so here's the part of the story where things start to fall apart. So what we found, so it just so happened after about 7 years, we were starting to look at the economics. We wanted to see, hey, can't we make this positive for the town? We started to look at kind of where they were sending it. We asked our hauler to take us to where they were sending it. They were hemming and hawing about it. And it turned out that we finally kind of pushed. The reason they were hemming and hawing about taking us to where they were sending it was because half the time they're actually sending it to a landfill. And so here we thought we were doing the right thing. And in fact, half the time we weren't, which was a shame. So we tried to figure out why that was. It turned out that our hauler was telling us, well, sometimes your waste is too contaminated. So what did that mean? Well, it turns out that we found out something called passerby contamination. So someone walking their dog on an afternoon, or maybe they're just walking down the street. It's pickup day. They see a garbage can. They're drinking a soda. They throw the can in. They throw something else in that shouldn't have been in. There's that piece. Then we also found out our contract was coming up due, and our hauler was going to triple the price of our hauling, and that was just something that was going to be a non-starter for the town. So it just so happened that at the time, Bloomberg Philanthropies was asking the mayors of the country, do you have anything that you guys are working on that you'd like the money to figure out, but don't have the money to figure out? We'll give you money. So we put this proposal forward that, yeah, we were trying to figure out local food waste. They said, sounds great, here's some money, go figure it out. So we did, or so we tried. So it was all about kind of, their form of innovation is about running small tests, talk to 3 or 5 people, try something, see if they respond, and if so, continue to follow that, follow them down that path. And if they don't like it, change direction, try something else. I could talk for hours on this. I'm gonna, I'll do this in just a couple of minutes. What did we find out? We found out, lots of things. And Robert, one of your speakers, could probably speak to this too, because I know he does a lot of marketing. But people respond to social use, and they respond to social pressure a lot more than they do to signs. People just tend to not look at signs, and if they do, they get confused. Unless it's the exact picture of exactly what they're supposed to throw away, issues happen. Messaging matters. Someone on your block is a better, we found out that someone on your block is doing the wrong thing actually worked better than just saying, hey, we want to remind you to do a better job because, we're finding some contamination in the bins. We actually got a few people call us and apologize when we sent out messages saying, we realize someone on this particular block is messing up. To say, hey, I'm sorry, it might have been me, I'm so sorry, I'll do better next time. So there's definitely a lot there that can help a town do this right. And then people have their own biases and knowledge. They do aspirational recycling. It's like, oh, this should be recyclable, or compostable, so I'm going to throw it in the bin. And obviously that can cause problems too. We did a lot of auditing of garbage and food waste. We looked at, what were people throwing away, what were people recycling. And when we told people we were doing it, we would actually find people come out when we would pick up their food waste at the curbside to ask us, hey, did I do it right this week? So it was really kind of interesting, when you got to engage folks, that a lot of folks were actually interested to know if they're doing things right. We created a test street. We wanted to know if social pressure would help. If people who had never done it before, had no interest in doing it before, all of a sudden it was free to them, would they do it? Lots of, there's some information there that can be gleaned, but it definitely helps if you have ambassadors, folks who really want it to work, who are willing to kind of tell their neighbors how to do it. Let's see, some additional thoughts and learning. So I'm just checking. So it's important to have an advocate in the municipality. So if you're doing this with somebody, if you're doing this with the town or a township, having someone there who wants this to work is very important. Tap into your core group of committed folks who are willing to make it work. Follow the money. At the end of the day, this is all going to be about, can you save people the town money? And so find out where that is. Provide incentives. So one of the ways that we were looking at was something, if people are charged to throw away their trash by the pound, then if you give them a way to divert that poundage and tell them it's free, then there's a way, then you can get them to potentially do something like this. The economics with a hauler are critical. So if you're a town, you might want to consider self-hauling, looking into that. Restaurants are interested because they pay you in higher landfill fees than residents. You'll have to deal with the not in my backyard syndrome. So just, you have to figure out kind of where this all goes if you're going to do it locally. Lots of red tape when it comes to food waste in New Jersey with DEP and others. You can't force it. Participant mistakes are costly. So if you force them to do it and you don't kind of slap their hands when they do things wrong and or fine them, then it's just going to be a problem. And don't work against other nonprofits. There's going to be people out there, organizations out there who are trying to redistribute food. This isn't about trying to take food off of people's tables. If the food can go to somebody who can eat it first, let them do that first. So finally, just the last minute here, from a community food cycle perspective, unfortunately, this didn't have a great ending in Princeton because of some DEP issues. We were all planned to kind of start this up locally. Princeton had an issue with some illegal dumping going on that was not related to food waste, but it basically closed down the site where we were going to do this. And so what I decided to do then was start my own company, Community Food Cycle, which is now trying to create that model here in Hopewell, New Jersey. And it's all about trying to keep food waste local, create a small footprint, make it cost neutral or beneficial, create an educational program. And to do that, you've got to partner with municipalities, haulers, and nonprofits. And that's what I'm doing. And so if you're interested at all, let me know. My information is there. And I'm sure you'll get it from Isaac afterwards. So with that, I will pass this on to the next presenter.
So with that, I'm going to go to Corey Manzel from the Center for Ecotechnology. Corey is the Strategic Services Representative at CET. She supports their waste reduction programs by leading stakeholder engagement processes, providing on-site technical assistance to businesses and institutions. Corey also coordinated CET's partnership with the Harvard Food and Law Policy Clinic to develop a toolkit for states and cities considering organic waste bans. And of course, this being the NJCC, I feel the need to mention she has a BS in environmental policy and a BA in planning and public policy from Rutgers. So of course, got to have those Jersey roots. So with that, I will hand it to Corey.
Great, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. And can you see, nope. Can you see the screen?
Yep, we are good to go.
Great. So first and foremost, thank you, Isaac and New Jersey Composting Council, for inviting me to speak on today's webinar, and for those that are tuning in today. So as Isaac mentioned, I'm Corey Ann Mansell, Strategic Services Representative at the Center for Ecotechnology, or CET for short. We are a nonprofit that helps people and businesses save energy and reduce waste. And we've been doing this for over 40 years. And so today I will focus on our experience helping businesses and institutions recover, reduce, and separate their food waste, and the key strategies to long-lasting programs. So for background, much of our experience is working with businesses and institutions in Massachusetts through our Recycling Works in MA Recycling Assistance Program. We helped design this program and now administer it on behalf of Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. And our website, recyclingworksma.com, offers an online database of service providers, hotline, best practices, case studies, and more. So for some background on scale, since 2012, we've helped over 4,000 Massachusetts businesses and institutions take action. But furthermore, since 2013, we've also expanded our commercial and institutional food waste assistance across the country. And here are some of our impact to date, with edible food donated, tons of food out of the waste stream and put to higher use, and carbon emissions avoided. I recommend going to Wasted Food Solutions website to learn more about how we are working with states and cities across the country for state-specific resources, and then of course for a toolbox of best practices for reduction, recovery, and reuse of wasted food. Quickly, just a little bit more background. A key component to Recycling Works in Massachusetts and our Wasted Food Solutions resources is technical assistance. And so technical assistance helps people and businesses and institutions implement and expand their programs. So this could include connecting them with service providers, identifying new materials for separation, and pinpointing areas that may pose a challenge, such as areas where there might be instances of contamination. So it's designed to recommend programs that will hopefully work for each business, looking at it from a sustainable perspective for environmental, social, and economic perspectives. Then listed here, components of technical assistance can include training, signage, cost impact analysis, virtual or in-person walkthroughs, as it can sometimes be really just truly eye-opening to have an outside, unbiased party reviewing those current operations and identifying some needs or opportunities. Technical assistance does work across the EPA food recovery hierarchy, shown here. So we are able to look at programs from source reduction to composting, everything in between, really meeting a business where they are, whether that's their own interest or more of a regulatory interest, regardless, kind of looking at it from a holistic perspective. However, today I will kind of zoom in on 3 components that create the strong, lasting programs across the hierarchy that can be done with or without technical assistance. So first and foremost, checking in and communicating with your hauler and Insight is key. We heard right before this, definitely having that conversation with your hauler and processing site, which could be a composter or anaerobic digestion or other, seeing what materials they accept and process. And then also not just having that conversation at the beginning of your program, but continuing that conversation as we know the marketplace does change. So there could be different components that can be incorporated later on. So an example of this includes maybe an anaerobic digestion facility that accepts compostable products, but you want to see if they're separating those compostable products with a depackaging system that then is going into the trash. Not necessarily guaranteed, but something to consider. Likewise, if you are considering compostable products, you want to be clear and upfront about what products you want to purchase with your hauler and end site, as not all compostable products can be processed at every compost site. So an example of this is we are working with the town of Tustin in New York. They received a grant from New York Department of Environmental Conservation to install a small-scale anaerobic digestion unit, and we're developing the informational packets for their restaurants that's tailored to these units. And so it's an ongoing, again, conversation between the town, the businesses, CET, and the unit on what can and should be processed at the system. We also recommend, and it's linked here, our hauler contracting guidance document to see what modifications might be available to your services, where you might be able to add or remove some certain collection aspects, as well as noteworthy components such as the feedback for improper disposal, negotiation, service level changes, really those kind of considerations when you're speaking with your hauler. Second, defining the roles and responsibilities within the program. So if a member of your team notices that the system is breaking down, do they have someone to go to and address the issue at the forefront? It's understandable that a program is going to evolve over time, but for it to actually evolve smoothly as possible, we'll want to figure out who and how these changes will be made kind of before they need to happen. So again, another example is if somebody notices that the food scraps containers should be picked up more frequently, do they know who to go to notify that that might be a need? An example of this is we created a document for the West Hartford Department of Public Works. And so they were implementing a program with their 17 K through 12 schools to source separate the food scraps and send it to an anaerobic digestion facility. And we helped streamline those communications and review the roles for the DPW, the faculty, staff, students, and parents, so that everyone could be involved and participate as much as possible. Because defining the program with the roles also increases the buy-in and responsibility for that program, and opening the door for feedback and improvements. Because if you don't know who to go to either say what's going well or what's not going well, then you might miss that opportunity. Here is also a link to our source separation guidance document. And so this is a resource that can be helpful across the board, where it's reviewing best practices for collection areas, the movement of material, how you may want to arrange bins in your kitchen. And this document might help kind of pinpoint areas where you want to be defining certain roles and responsibilities for the program. So last but not least, signage and training. Having that clear and consistent signage with the appropriate bins can significantly reduce the possibility for contamination. Working with Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, I learned the phrase twin the bin, which I'd actually like to expand to triple the bin for food scraps, trash, and recyclables, always being found next to each other. I understand if you need to walk twice as far to throw out your food scraps, you may not make it there. So if possible, also having the exact photos of the materials at your business or facility on the signs can decrease contamination and confusion as well. Then, of course, updating the signage as the program evolves or if there's any changes. And with that, having some opportunities for training and retraining is also very important. So in the context of a university, having a training as part of the orientation around what is happening on campus for source separation of food scraps, as well as ongoing messaging throughout the campus and throughout the year is important. But the same goes for a business as well. You want to be looking at, okay, as you're hiring, explaining the program is equally as important as the refreshers that are key to its success. And I think also mentioned right before this, here's the wishful cycling, and you could hear one day that something's accepted. And so having those refreshers just helps program overall. And an example of this is we worked with Clark University to update their signage, and they also were able to retrain their custodians and residential staff. And then they saw a 42% reduction in recycling and contamination at their pilot building. So that's pretty notable. And then also, training doesn't necessarily just need to be, a classroom setting, but it can also be opportunistic, as maybe with your communication and conversations with your hauler and end site, they might be able to invite people on site, or they might be able to come and present about what they're doing. And that also helps foster buy-in and understanding of why the program in itself is important. And here are a few photos of some signage and bins at a few different locations. So one is at the Mass Art University. And so here you can see the shadow boxes that actually has material from their campus, as well as very clearly defined bins for the compost, recycling, and trash. And then at events, there's some success with putting clear bags for your recycling and food scraps so that you can look in, and hopefully if it's not contaminated, other people can follow suit. And then also for a curbside drop-off program, clearly labeling the bins and what can and cannot go in is very important. Before I wrap up, I'll just say that the examples today were tailored to the source separation of for animal feed, composting, and anaerobic digestion, but it's the same three factors are equally as important for source reduction and donation programs as well. Again, that signage for potentially edible, donatable food and where you're storing it, the training, the defining the roles and responsibilities, who's going to ensure that the edible food is stored properly, etc. And then also talking with your food rescue organizations or with your source reduction technologies or how those methodologies are implemented. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to connect with me. I think we'll have time at the end for some questions. Again, always feel free to lean on us. We love to support initiatives and interest in wasted food diversion or wasted food. So not to say I love wasted food, but I do appreciate the programs that help reduce it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Corey. With that, I'm going to ask Robert Began from Sabert Corporation to join us. He's the senior product manager of compostable products for Sabert, which is a global food packaging manufacturer. In his current role, Robert oversees the product development and category management of molded fiber pulp and bioplastic food packaging. And just to share a little NJCC related news, we're excited. We're going to be announcing tomorrow that Sabert has come on as a benefactor member and Robert as a board member. So with that, I
Excited.
will let Robert take it away.
All right. Thanks, Isaac. I'm going to get the screen share. Let me know if you guys see my screen. So thanks for the introduction, Isaac, NJCC, for having me. The host of panelists, the content, I think a really great way to kick off summer. Home composting, I know we're all excited for the season in full swing here. So I'm going to reinforce a lot of things that were talked about today, take you a little bit through what happens behind the scenes with packaging, what's influencing a lot of the product development decisions that are commercialized, and then just some tips on how to put a program together. So this is kind of the agenda here, but a quick Sabre introduction for those of you who potentially don't know Sabre. We're located here in New Jersey. Our corporate office is in Sayreville. Our research and development center is the original factory is also down the street from us. We started in plastics, but we also are a manufacturer of the compostable side too. So we opened our first facility, going on that slide from left to right, in 2009 in China. And now we're also breaking ground. We broke ground this year on a new facility coming on board in Q3 in Texas. So a manufacturer, that's our roots. We're a global organization. We're on multiple continents. North America is where our home base is, but Europe, Australia, and Asia. So we're trying to get a good global sense of what's happening in composting is interesting across the different regions. So innovation is kind of in our DNA. We have a global team in compostable products. It's a team of scientists, engineers, and so forth, looking at next generation development and strong distribution routes. Without our partners, our brokers, our distributors, and so forth, we want to get our products to market. So really great kind of team effort to bring composting. Quick overview of some of the products that we are most famous for in the compostable side. Bowls and containers, a lot of generally molded fiber. We do a little bit in PLA right now, but mostly molded fiber. Piece of the land. It's gonna, this is a schematic here. You see tons of room for expansion. We're excited to bring this on board starting in Q3. So manufacturing products locally, compostable products locally is going to be a big. Talking about what's driving the market. So before we get into the packaging and the technical side of putting a program together, there's a lot of things that we have to consider behind the scenes. What's driving the industry? So we do see a lot of growth and a lot of market interest for compostable products. Molded fiber specifically, the bowl has been a really great product category and a leader. It's a lot of restaurant concepts and so forth that built around a bowl concept. So it's driving a lot of interest there. Growth in the middle class is also driving a lot of interest in food and compostable packaging. We're also seeing molded fiber break into other categories that are non-food related. So we're seeing interest in this material source and commercialization at large. We're seeing customers locally here, traditionally customers who haven't used a lot of molded fiber or compostable products in their packaging programs like Costco and Walmart, making bold claims to introduce, whether it's recycled content or compostable packaging. They are putting claims out there, putting pressure on innovation to happen faster and sooner. And then we have policies driving a lot of these bans. So we have customer interest. We see growth for it as a convenience item. But there's a lot of policies that have come up in the last 12 to 18 months. These are just a snapshot of some headlines of what's driving just packaging trends. Either it's a push out of single-use plastic, it's a mandate for compostables, it's a ban on PLA, it's an alert or a red mark for PFAS and molded fiber. These are all policies driving some of the narrative behind the scenes. So, for the sake of this content here in this presentation, try to break down the bans into three big buckets: single-use plastic, PLA, and PFAS. And these are some things that influence programs and influence contamination. After we, it's not even getting in front of the bin right now. It's a lot of things that are happening behind the scenes that are also influencing. Looking at single-use plastic, and I just want to show, the key chart is, you can see the variety of colors are there, and you can see how fragmented the country is as far as single-use plastic bans. So, when it's harder for national customers to roll out and to purchase certain products when there's such a fragmented legislation behind the scenes here. So we're seeing a lot of interest. I think we've heard some other presentations from Matt. The consumers are driving a lot of this. So that's what we're seeing. Now let's move to PLA plastic. I think this is a big contamination sticking point for this audience here. PLA has been a great driver to increase food waste. There's been some studies out there, but it also brings in some of these lookalikes, the petroleum PET items, for example. As you can see on the bottom there, to the untrained consumer, these three different types of items can easily get mixed up in the various settings where they're being used. The state of Washington has put forward some legislation behind this coming this year to address certain contamination issues like this. BPI, for example, is trying to help the industry pre-competitively put a standard together to be more consistent as product manufacturers. As you can see, the first cup in that picture is unidentified PLA. The last one is an identified item. So putting standards around product labeling is going to be a big driver to help minimize contamination at the bin. And then we have food packaging on the molded fiber side and PFAs, which have been a trending issue for the last 18 to 24 months. This is a chemical class. It's a pretty common class in a lot of products, from firefighting foam to flame retardant gear to carpet stain resistance and so forth. So it's in a lot of our everyday lives. For food packaging, it's been used as an oil and grease resistant repellent. So this has been a big narrative. I'm not going to deep dive into what PFAS are, but there's been a lot of pressure to remove it. BPA put out new policy changes. So for Sailor, it was important for us to accelerate the removal, which we've done. And this was able to put our customers in position for these forthcoming legislation bans that we're seeing across not even the country, even across the globe. We see globally the country of Denmark is getting ready to ban PFAS in food packaging. San Francisco has already done it. There's some states that have legislation on the table, which I'm going to show you right here. So again, another reason that makes contamination a little bit more of a loaded question is when you get to the bin, what policies are driving what's been put into market. So we're trying to minimize that on the commercialization side. So for PFAS, just what we're doing here is to make it super clear. I mentioned we've launched a PFAS-free product. We put together a new kind of a logo identifier, so it's clearly visible to our customers and so forth. So these are important for us. Another influential driver is COVID. COVID has put a lot of single-use packaging under the microscope. We've seen foam come back into some places where it's been banned just out of necessity. We don't want to see this digression where in the progress we've made. So compostable packaging has been put under the microscope, just like a lot of other single-use items. And we believe its positioning is still strong to kind of meet some of these kind of post-COVID reopening strategies, for hygiene and single-use and so forth. So, we believe strong position for compostable packaging moving forward to help even combat what COVID has put out there. And then standards and labeling. I know I'm going super fast, so I want to give our other last speaker a quick some time here. But standards and certifications are a big deal. The top row is some of the standards, and the bottom row are our certifiers. So we work with the standards first before we get to the certifications and the logos, which we know are really important here. So this is just a quick overview of what we're at there. And I want to show you what really happens to a molded fiber product after it goes through ASTM and the European standard for composting. So you can see at the start from the finish, these are clear guidelines. This is, live market research that we've done on our product. So again, doing these things behind the scenes, following the right legislation, these are all building up to how we get to the bin and what the consumer starts to see. And they start to see a lot of these certifications, and certifications, as I'm going to show you in a few slides, the logo doesn't always mean the consumer understands what it is or what to do. These are some of the most popular certifications for compostable products. USDA bio-based is more of a material transparency. BPI we're pretty familiar with. A counterpart, European counterpart, is the OK Compost program. A little bit different from BPI, offers industrial composting, but also as a home composting certification, really important for our European market. And this is done under home garden standards. So again, our products fall to this. And then the last one is CMA, the Composter Manufacturing Alliance, where BPI is doing lab-based testing for certification. CMA is doing field level. So, we're trying to, again, behind the scenes of product development, ensure that we're compliant across the board before we get to that bin system. Because we know it's tricky when they get there, but we're trying to mitigate as many issues as possible before we get there. One of the things we're going to start to do, I know the industry is working towards, again, labeling standards, but we're looking at addressing a new standard for ourselves, again, to increase with how the consumer interfaces with packaging. So I think the call to action is super important here, because we have research that shows that showing the BPI logo or showing the recycle symbol doesn't always resonate with the consumer, and language, is a clear driver for that. And we have our certified proof statement there. So this is our first iteration to improve labeling on product to really get that bin right. Looking at some basics. So again, and this is the last section here, but we've done a lot of research and we see there's a lot of confusion between the words biodegradable and compostable. These are just all, how does it break down? What does it mean? It's confusing. Does it really happen? It sounds too good to be true. Can you eat it? Like, we hear all these kind of outrageous claims between biodegradable and compostable. So there's a lot of doubt out there. So, showing the right certifications, having the right product labeling is all good, but we're going to talk a little bit just to reinforce some ideas on how to set up that program. But I just wanted to share this slide with you on some research we did back in 2018, where we pulled over 1,000 customers. This is just a segment of that, but we showed them these two logos, and everybody thought they knew what the chasing arrows meant. And not a lot of folks knew what the compostable or the BPI logo necessarily meant. So again, labeling it's tricky, and you don't have a lot of space, and there's some limitations there. So it's not just, we understand labeling is super critical, but there's also other drivers that are going to help get things right and minimize contamination upstream. And just this is another interesting slide here, just the knowledge about local recycling, curbside waste sorting, and composting. Not a lot of general knowledge. So when we get programs live with restaurants or big venues, it's important with the communication strategy and the engagement with the actual customer who's using, touching, and eventually making or breaking the success of your program. This was a great kind of quote I pulled from BPI. I think this was posted in BioCycle, with just some research behind food packaging success driving food waste recovery. So we know it can be done. So it needs to be done right and cleanly. That's what we're all here to do. So we talked about some of these trends. This is my second to last slide here. Some of the trends driving acceptance. I show this slide to the folks on my end who have really no familiarity with composting, compost collection, and whatnot. And we have to tell them, look, there's thousands of compost facilities, but generally they're not set up for food waste and packaging. So, it's a big collaboration effort when you start to get a program up and running. You can't just put all the onus upstream. You need to really get your back of house in order. Contamination is that big issue. Standardization has been something we've all been trying to alignment on, and then these PFAS bans had put a stop and put pressure to innovate faster. See, these are all things that have been driving the acceptance over the last kind of few years and really getting louder the narrative. So I pulled together a bunch of research that we've collected over the past few years, just some quick tips, try to break it down in big buckets, just the way my brain thinks, on how to, this is from the product side. You can deep dive into all these individual itemized bullets here. But most importantly, it's leadership buy-in. understanding what's happening on site in phase one, doing your waste audit, doing a site assessment, aligning with with that organic stream, with the hauler, with the compost facility, understanding, what can be accepted. Is it pre-consumer? Is it back of house? We talked about meat and proteins. Are products accepted? Can they be phased in? Corey talked about the bin system. I love some of those examples, Corey. Training, super important. I talked a little bit about educating the consumers and then piloting a program. Don't go nationwide, start it small scale, phase it in, keep training, consider the seasonality on some of these events or in college campuses, for example, continued communication, and then repeat 1, 2, 3, reassess, phase 1, 2. Again, it's just a complete cycle here to make sure there's a successful program behind that packaging decision that was made. So I try to get that all in. Gosh, I probably stole too much time. So I'm going to pass it back over to the panel.
All right. Thank you very much, Robert. Angelina Paoni, she's from the Ulster County Resource Recovery Agency, and she is their recycling coordinator in Kingston, New York. She's a proud member of the USCC and a certified compost STA program member. Prior to working at the UCRRA, she was recycling and compost educator for the Cornell Cooperative Extension of Schenectady County. So I will let you take it from here.
Good morning, and thank you so much firstly to the New Jersey chapter for welcoming me to speak today and represent the Organics Recovery Facility at the Ulster County Resource Recovery Agency. As the recycling coordinator, it is always my pleasure to speak about our composting operation because we truly feel that this program has enhanced our education initiatives at UCRRA and has really initiated an important ongoing dialogue in our community about waste reduction and food recovery. So this is a program that we're really energized and excited about, and certainly always excited to share our success and discuss our perspective as a facility around some of the conversations that we're having today. So the Ulster County Resource Recovery Agency is a solid waste authority. It's a public benefit corporation, and we operate 2 New York State DEC permitted solid waste facilities, one in Kingston, New York, and one in New Paltz, New York. And this is an aerial view of our Kingston facility, where our organics recovery facility is located. It should be viewable in the top center portion of this aerial view. And you can see I've highlighted some of the other sustainable materials management programs that we offer in pursuit of our mission. But today we're going to be focusing on our organics recovery project that started as a small pilot project back in 2012. The agency worked with the engineering consultant, O2 Compost, to design and implement the pilot project back in 2012 using extended aerated static pile methods of composting, or EASP. And we received an authorization from the DEC to start composting 500 tons per year of source separated organics, and the program grew with tremendous success very quickly. We accept commercial source separated organics, so still to this day there's no residential drop-off program. It's just for commercial partners. And in 2016 we built an expanded site that virtually doubled the square foot area of the composting site. Our authorization expanded to 2,500 cubic yards of source separated organics per year, and that's the same authorization that we're currently operating under. And since that expansion over the past 3 years, the facility has really become a fully established organics recovery facility, and we not only accept commercial organics from within the planning unit, but we actually accept organics from across the Mid-Hudson region of New York, New York's capital district, parts of New York City, parts of New Jersey. So we have a lot of partners in our composting program that help us achieve this mission of waste diversion. So we're really excited that we've kind of demonstrated the economic feasibility and the environmental benefits of composting. And we're always looking to the future to see when we could expand the program, which we're looking at a possible expansion coming down the line the next few years. So that's very exciting. So as I mentioned, we use an extended aerated static pile method, or EASP, and I'd just like to share a couple of brief comments about EASP and briefly explain how it works. Some of the benefits of EASP is that we're able to process very large volumes of food waste very quickly and relatively inexpensively on a very small footprint of a site. And so this really helped demonstrate the economic feasibility of this program. And it is also very excellent at aiding in odor mitigation and optimizing the decomposition process. So essentially, and this is very boiled down, the food scraps that are delivered to our site get an initial mix with wood chips. That's our primary bulking agent. And then that material is mixed and layered on top of an EASP system, where blowers and pipes force air through the system for 30 days, reaching thermophilic temperatures. And then after 30 days, that material is removed. It is cured in long windrow piles. It is screened and then offered for sale in bulk. And it's unblended, and we do have an STA certified compost product at the back end of this operation. So the agency does not do any hauling. From the onset of this program, we have only been a drop-off facility for commercial organics, and we involve users into this program through what we call our Partners in Composting program, which is a pretty formal process of onboarding users to work with us. This is a little snip of our 12-page guide that we recently developed. If you'd like to take a look at that, it is available on our website, and we provide this to our partners in our composting program, whereby first they would initiate interest in composting at their facility, and we provide a survey for them to gather some important information about their facility, and then we would invite them to come for a tour of our facility. And these meetings are so essential and very important for us to get to know them and how we might be able to better provide support services, and also that they can see our process in composting and get to know us, and we can provide a little bit of hands-on training for them at that point. So after meeting and working with us, we asked them to develop a plan to educate all the participants in their program. And there are many ways that they can do that. If the partner is located in Ulster County, we can provide a really high level of support, such as staff trainings, provide posters, bin stickers. We can also provide tote bins for the collection of the organics. And all these things help launch a really successful program. And once they start delivering food scraps to our site, the relationship doesn't end there, right? This is an ongoing partnership that we have with all of these facilities. We give them continuous feedback about the quality or the contamination of their loads, and further stakeholder engagement and support and trainings as needed throughout this process. And our goal is to get clean feedstocks in so that we can produce a very high quality compost on the back end of our operation. And this is essential to the economic vitality of compost marketing and making these programs truly sustainable and feasible economically, is that you're able to produce a high quality compost. And that's why reducing contamination is so important to us. So you can see here we have yard waste, that's our primary bulking agent, source separated organics. This is a really idealized photo of what food waste looks like. And I'll also mention here that the solid waste tipping fee in Ulster County is currently $105 per ton. So that's very intentional that there is a cost differential to incentivize participation in this program, to incentivize businesses and schools to reduce their waste and pay lower fees for diversion. So this is a sample of the new poster that we developed that we provide in this program, trying to demonstrate the waste streams that we want to accept and avoid. As an industrial scale composting operation, we can take all food residuals, including meat, bones, and dairy products. And these are some of the common compost contaminants that we're highlighting here that you see in the food service industry. Things like hairnets, latex gloves, cardboard, bulk liquids. Those are all undesirable items that have to be removed from the waste stream in very difficult ways, but they're very easy to make their way into the organics. So we're going to talk about managing contaminants in a little spiel that I like to call the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good news is a well-managed program can really control and prevent these contaminants in these types of programs. And it takes thoughtfulness, it takes a proactive approach and a really robust education strategy to kind of echo what some of the other panelists have been speaking about. It's so important to educate your participants before you launch a program, alongside rolling out the program. And it doesn't end there. You want to have continuous engagement with all the stakeholders and participants involved in this process. And that's the key to success, because it's very common. We see all the time, you know, new students or new staff will come on board and they did not get the same level of training. And that's when you might start to see some contaminants, among many other things. But the good news is it's not rocket science. We can create a clean, uncontaminated feedstock at the point of source generation very easily with a little thoughtfulness. But the bad news is some level of contamination is almost always inevitable, right? It's very easy for these things to make their way into the wrong bin, and these contaminants need to be removed by hand before processing as much as possible. And there's not always a clear path to accountability by the time a contaminated load reaches the compost site, which we've talked a little bit about. But especially in these types of community composting systems that are fragmented, where you might have a facility that's generating the food scraps, and then you have a company that's hauling those food scraps, and then you have the end composter that's seeing the load at the end. Who's accountable when a load is contaminated, right? It may be the driver's problem, right? Because they have to pay the fees for contamination, but really, is it the restaurant's problem or the facility's problem for not training their staff properly? Or is it the compost site's error for not fully engaging all the stakeholders and providing them with the tools for success? And in my opinion, it's everyone's problem when we have contamination, when this system breaks down. So clear path of communication and accountability is part of that planning process, and it's so essential. So now the ugly is that some contaminants, unfortunately, are destined to go through the system. You cannot catch everything, and these contaminants have to be removed after processing, which is a huge strain on the efficiency of composting operations, right? It's a waste of labor, it's a waste of time, it's a waste of fuel, and it threatens the vitality and the viability of that compost that we're trying to market to farmers and landscapers and home gardeners. And so this is a real photo of a load of food waste, right? That we've seen. We have seen it all. So contamination is absolutely a challenge. With as much education as possible, you will still see this. And compostable packaging, unfortunately, does add another level of complexity in these community composting programs. Again, if you are having residents or users bag their food scraps, those bags have to be inspected thoroughly. And that's easy to do here or there. But when you have a load of 100 bags, can you possibly cut open every single bag? No. But at our facility, we do supervise and inspect every single load that comes on site, whether it's organics, yard waste, electronics, recycling, solid waste. Every single load is supervised to make sure that we're not receiving unauthorized waste or contaminants, and we can catch it as early on as possible and follow that issue right up the food chain, so to speak. So the great news is, you know, it takes careful planning. A lot of this stuff can be avoided, and it's not rocket science. So to echo some of the things we've been speaking about, some of the keys to success in large facilities: conduct a waste audit. This is so essential to understand the waste stream that's unique to that facility, and you might be able to identify those items that are going to be problematic and target them right from the beginning. Building relationships is so important in community composting, to echo that of our speakers. How can we involve all stakeholders across the entire system and have ongoing communication with the site that's generating the waste, with the hauler, and with the end user of the program? Convenience is key to stopping contamination. It's often not enough to just put out another bin and a sign and expect that people are going to know what to do, right? You have to have clear messaging, creating a good sorting station with simple pictures, not a lot of words. And if you can color code the bins and the signs and the posters, then that really helps as well. And be open and willing to adapt to change. Again, with this theme that this is an ongoing process. We're not just going to train people and then walk away. We are going to get their feedback. We're going to assess. We might do another waste audit, monitor these bins, and make sure that there's a path and responsibility for training new people or new participants. And these concepts are universal to an extent, but I also want to stress that you should avoid a one-size-fits-all approach when training different facilities, because each site and situation will have its own unique challenges and opportunities, right? So some of these facilities might have more pre-consumer or post-consumer waste, and there's a huge difference in the quality of the food scraps. Some of them may want to use compostables. Some of them, their participants may be transient, right? Whereas in other facilities, those same participants are going to be there day after day. And how does that affect your education efforts or your building a green team? So these are all important things to keep in mind. Really briefly to wrap up, I also would like to offer some commentary around compostable products. And again, I've kind of organized this as the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good news is that compostables absolutely play a role in achieving zero waste goals in community composting programs. They're proven to increase diversion and increase participation in composting because people really like to use compostables. They don't like to use plastic. And so that's a really wonderful thing. But the bad news is that they add a level of complexity for some of the reasons that we've already discussed. So if you look at this picture, right, if you're a compost operator up in a tractor getting ready to mix this load, you have to just trust that it's all compostable, right? And that those bags are not plastic and that they're truly going to be compostable. People are so confused about labeling, and there's a lot of labels out there: biodegradable, bio-based, plant-based, compostable, and not each label is created the same or means the same thing. And it's my personal opinion that compostables, while they play a really important role, it's kind of a band-aid on this larger issue, right, of a throwaway culture. And if we can replace a disposable single-use item with a more durable, reusable option, then that's always the way we want to go. And that's always the conversation that I try to have with our partners in our composting program. Because the ugly here is that industrial composting options are scarce, and they're scarce for a reason. Many compostable products are heat resistant up to 190 degrees, whereas active thermophilic composting occurs around 131 to 160 degrees. So some of these products also take longer to disintegrate. It could take 190 days, whereas our facility, our active composting is completed after a 30-day cycle, and then 60 days of curing. So these products have to be reintroduced into the system several times before they fully disintegrate. And again, the more you're moving material in waste and recycling, the more challenging it is, the more difficult it is. And we've talked a little bit about how some products may contain chemicals that persist in the finished compost product, which is absolutely a concern because we want to provide a really high quality compost, and consumers are becoming more aware of this emerging science of fluorinated chemicals being in these products. And as a composter, we strive to educate participants as much as possible. Here's a little sample of what you might see, right? This is a load that came from a music festival and a very well-intentioned program. It had lots of volunteers, it had lots of signage, and they had been using our site for many years, but there was a change in staff. And that staff ordered products that upon further examination, we found they were not actually compostable. And so we actually had to sort through this by hand, which is not sanitary, and you never want to do that, to pull out all the utensils. And so things like this happen, and it's very troublesome. And so you want to stop this as soon as possible so you don't get to a point where you're sorting through 20 tons of food waste like this. So our policy at UCRRA, we do accept compostable products, but we rely heavily on the Biodegradable Products Institute and the ASTM standards that they set, because a certified compostable product has been scientifically tested for biodegradation, disintegration, and it undergoes an analysis for heavy metals and other laboratory tests to confirm that there's no adverse effects on the finished product from any chemicals or additives made in those products. And so BPI assures us it's one of the standards that we can rely on to assure that we're only receiving products that aren't containing fluorinated chemicals. And this is really the industry technical standard for a lot of composting facilities, in my knowledge, because of this pass-fail criteria that they set for scientific testing and third-party verification and things like that. And of course, we like to see an education program in place. And to the greatest extent possible, compostable packaging should be clearly identifiable as certified compostable. So you can see here, there's things that are imprinted or clearly labeled compostable, or they're colored items. And as from a facilities perspective, this is so important that those operators, those compost operation staff can look at the load and clearly judge that these items are okay to pass through the system. So this is the system that we're kind of moving towards at UCRRA, to really allow only compostable packaging that's BPI and has these imprinted labels or colored pieces of packaging. And I hope that you do choose to follow our stories as we continue to engage our community. We are online at UCRRA on Facebook and YouTube and Instagram, and we have a lot of additional resources on our website, ucrra.org. And just thank you so much for your time and attention. I hope I didn't go over too much there, and I'm sure you have great questions that I'll look forward to helping the team answer.
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. So I think what all our speakers, if I could quickly summarize, highlighted is the need when you're starting one of these programs, whether it's commercial, municipal, or otherwise, to make sure you set up a clear program, you work with your processor and hauler, and you're educating everywhere along the chain about what our processes are and how we want to get there. So with that, I know a lot of the questions have been answered already by our panelists, but I'll just highlight a couple of them and maybe ask the panelists to answer for those who weren't looking at the Q&A box. So one of the questions was for Matt about the Princeton program on whether you promoted food waste prevention as well as composting as part of that program.
Right. So I talked a little about working with other nonprofits in your area, and so in Princeton we have a nonprofit called that works on diverting food waste. We have a woman who was started something in collaboration with the university on diverting food waste and getting it to people who need it. So while we weren't specifically trying to source reduced food waste or we were partnering with folks to make sure that the town as a whole saw all the different aspects of that pyramid of the hierarchy.
Awesome. And I see here, I think this one would be aimed towards Corey. In the Clark University example, there was a stated 42% reduction in contamination. Were compostable food servicewares considered contamination?
No, I believe that they were working with a, well, yes, contamination in the recycling bin. If compostable material was going in there, yes, that was seen as a contaminant, but they do accept compostable ware in their food scraps bin. For that 42% reduction, yes, it included the compostable ware that was no longer in the recycling bin, but diverted to the food scraps bin. Hope that answered the question.
Got it. And Angie, you guys do not restrict post-consumer food waste. Is that correct?
We see both pre-consumer and post-consumer food scraps. That's correct.
Yeah, I think that's an important question for folks to think about, is when you're talking to potential facilities, some of them will only take pre-consumer food waste. So you just have to make sure as you're evaluating your options, you find the right facility for the type of operation. What else do we have here? Let's see here. So we have a question about moving away from PFAS, I know, Robert, you had talked about a phase one, and so you there was a question about moving towards phase two, and if a facility is looking to produce organic compost, are compostable products allowed?
Sure. So I'll take the first one. So phase one has already hit the market. Between April and May, we started phase one. So that's a modified version. We use a generally super low level of fluorine. The OK Compost program in Europe had a strict 100 parts per million standard already in place. So we had followed that for years, and when it became a little controversial over here, we just accelerated some development. But phase two, which we're calling, has just like super oil and grease, PFAS free, would be Q1 2021, also going to roll in through our Texas facility too. So Texas will be completely fluorine free. And to the second part of the question, I'm pretty certain that the allowance of compostable products inhibits the organic labeling standard for compost. I'd have to double check, not something I got jotted in memory here, but pretty certain that's the standard currently.
Yeah, that's my understanding, but
Yeah.
there's a number of certifications. We are partial to STA ourselves, being a chapter of the USCC, but we do want to stress how important it is to make sure that you're getting a certified compost and a high quality product at the end of your process there. Let's see. And I guess we'll go to a very sort of end with a specialized question here. Corey, you talked about the Tungsten, New York anaerobic digestion process project, and we had a question about how that biogas will be used and the residuals there. I don't know if you can speak any more to that.
Yeah, I would have to defer that to the Tustin Energy Committee. I know they're working on it, and there are updates, but from my end, it wouldn't be the most updated conversation. But if people want to discuss more, they can touch base with me after, and I'd be happy to dive into that.
Fantastic. And I just see that there's also a question about one of your slides that talked about, not accepting compostable ware. And I appreciate the answer that you gave there, which was about, again, as we've talked about throughout the webinar, making sure you talk to your processor and understanding what your options are. Because not every facility is going to use the same technology. It's going to accept the same feedstocks. And I think that's a good place to leave our webinar today. These are complex topics, but at the same time, they're not that complex, and they can be done. And there are people here to support you in doing that, from the NJCC and our members and all the people who we work with. So thanks to our panelists, and thanks for everyone who joined us today. And we, again, will encourage you guys to think about becoming a member of the NJCC and supporting our mission. And with that, have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, Isaac. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Happy composting.
You too, now.